In 1986, Amen filled living rooms with laughter, faith, and faces that felt like family. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the warmth faded fast. Behind those smiles were illness, shattered careers, and lives that slowly disappeared from view. Stay with us as we uncover the painful truth of what happened after Amen. Sherman Hemsley as Deacon Ernest Fry Sherman. Hemsley was born on February 1, 1938, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 48 years old, he played Deacon Ernest Fry, the sharp-tongued, power-hungry church deacon, in Amen, 1986. His performance defined the show's rhythm, turning verbal conflict into its main dramatic fuel. That commanding presence masked a deeply guarded personal life. Hemsley never married and had no children, choosing privacy while his career thrived through roles such as George Jefferson on The Jeffersons. Longtime relationships, including one with Kenny Johnston, were kept out of public view, shaped by industry pressure and fear of scrutiny, leaving his success accompanied by emotional distance rather than companionship. As work slowed, health problems moved quietly to the foreground. While his voice role on Dinosaurs kept him connected to television, Hemsley was battling advanced lung cancer behind the scenes. The illness progressed into superior vena cava syndrome, a severe complication that restricted blood flow and breathing, rapidly weakening him. Hemsley died on July 24, 2012, at 74 years old, at his home in El Paso, Texas, from complications related to lung cancer. A prolonged legal dispute over his estate delayed burial for months before he was finally interred with military honors at Fort Bliss National Cemetery. His estimated $3 million net worth, earned through decades of television success, closed a career celebrated by millions, but lived in profound solitude. Clifton Davis, as Reverend Reuben Gregory. Clifton Davis was born on October 4, 1945, in Chicago, Illinois. At 41 years old, he played Reverend Reuben Gregory, the principled and idealistic pastor, in Amen, 1986. His restrained authority balanced the show's chaos, giving emotional weight to its comedy. Away from the pulpit, his marriages bore the cost of personal struggle. Davis married 3 times. His first marriage ended as cocaine addiction spiraled out of control, threatening his career just as his songwriting success with Never Can Say Goodbye for the Jackson 5 elevated his profile. His later marriage to Ann Taylor also collapsed under pressure, before he eventually found stability with Monica Durant, whom he married in 2000. Physical consequences followed years of strain. Davis survived triple heart bypass surgery, a crisis that forced him to step back from constant performance and reassess his limits. After recovery, he returned with renewed focus, continuing acting work while later appearing in dramatic television projects such as Madam Secretary. As of 2026, Clifton Davis is 81 years old. He remains active as an actor, ordained minister, and motivational speaker, dividing his time between stage work, television appearances, and faith-based leadership. With an estimated $3 million net worth, his life reflects endurance shaped by collapse, recovery, and hard-earned balance. Anna Maria Horsford as Thelma Fry. Anna Maria Horsford was born on March 6, 1948, in New York City. At 38 years old, she played Thelma Fry, the strong-willed romantic daughter of Deacon Fry, in Amen, 1986. Her character became the emotional core of the series, driving its romantic storylines and giving the show warmth beneath its sharp comedy. That visibility, however, did not shield her from professional and personal strain. Horsford married Daniel Wolfe, but long shooting schedules and constant travel created emotional distance, turning companionship into prolonged loneliness. As her career continued through projects like The Wayans Brothers and the film Friday, she remained caught between steady work and the frustration of being repeatedly sidelined into supporting roles. Health challenges later added another layer of pressure. Horsford was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, a condition that required strict lifestyle control and constant medical monitoring. Even while managing her health, she continued acting in television dramas and soaps, including The Bold and the Beautiful, balancing physical discipline with professional endurance. As of 2026, Anna Maria Horsford is 78 years old. She remains active in film and television, continuing to accept roles that reflect longevity rather than stardom. With an estimated $2 million net worth, built through decades of consistent work, her career stands as a quiet testament to resilience in an industry that rarely made space for her to fully lead. Roz Ryan as Amelia Heddebrink. Roz Ryan was born on July 7, 1951, in Detroit, Michigan. At 35 years old, she played Amelia Heddebrink, the gossip-loving, sharp-witted church secretary, in Amen, 1986. Her timing and vocal presence elevated the show's humor, turning secondary scenes into memorable moments. While her career flourished on stage, her personal life remained unsettled. Ryan was married to Lance, a relationship that ended in divorce and left her raising their son Dante largely on her own. Even as she earned acclaim on Broadway in productions like Chicago and Dreamgirls, she continued to face industry limits that kept her boxed into comedic supporting roles. Physical strain followed years of intense performance schedules. Ryan struggled with obesity and cardiovascular issues, conditions that forced her to slow down while continuing voice work, such as Thalia in Disney's Hercules. Managing her health became inseparable from sustaining her career, particularly as stage and voice roles demanded endurance rather than visibility. As of 2026, Roz Ryan is 75 years old. She remains active in voice acting and theater, selectively returning to the stage while maintaining a steady presence in animation. With an estimated $1.5 million net worth, earned primarily through Broadway and voice work, her life reflects persistence shaped by discipline, adaptation, and survival beyond the spotlight. Jester Hairston as Raleigh Forbes. Jester Hairston was born on July 9, 1901, in Bellows Creek, North Carolina. At 85 years old, he played Raleigh Forbes, the wise and steady church elder, in Amen, 1986. His presence gave the series moral gravity, turning age and experience into quiet authority rather than spectacle. That calm dignity was earned through a life shaped by endurance. Hairston married Isabel Margaret Swanigan in 1939, and their marriage lasted nearly 5 decades, offering stability as he navigated a career limited by racial barriers. While his music reached the world through compositions like Mary's Boy Child and his work on Lilies of the Field, his acting roles remained restrained, often confined to supporting figures despite his immense cultural influence. Loss came late but deeply. After his wife's death in 1986, shortly after Amen began, Hairston withdrew further into work and routine. Advanced age brought physical decline rather than a single defining illness, and appearances slowed after his final television role on Family Matters, marking a gradual retreat rather than a sudden fall. Jester Hairston died on January 18, 2000, at 98 years old in Los Angeles, California, from natural causes. He was laid to rest at Inglewood Park Cemetery, closing a life that bridged music, film, and history. His estimated $1 million net worth, modest by modern standards, reflected a career built on preservation, dignity, and cultural legacy rather than commercial reward. Barbara Montgomery. As Cassietta Heddebrink. Barbara Montgomery was born on June 25, 1939, in New York City. At 47 years old, she played Cassietta Heddebrink, the sharp, outspoken sister within the church circle, in Amen, 1986. Her performance added friction and realism, grounding the show's humor in recognizable emotional tension. Off-screen, Montgomery's life followed a solitary path. She never married, a choice shaped as much by industry pressure as by personal independence, while her career grew through serious stage work with the Negro Ensemble Company. Even as she gained recognition from theater and later television projects like Married People, leading roles remained elusive, reinforcing a sense of professional containment. Years of typecasting and limited narrative agency pushed Montgomery toward reinvention rather than retreat. She began redirecting her energy into storytelling from a position of control, moving behind the camera and into mentorship. That shift culminated in her work as a director, including the historical film Metodi, a project that reflected her long-standing desire to shape meaning rather than wait to be chosen, transforming frustration into authorship. As of 2026, Barbara Montgomery is 87 years old. She lives largely outside the spotlight, recognized more for artistic integrity than celebrity, with an estimated $1 million net worth earned through decades of stage, television, and independent film work. Her story ends not with decline, but with quiet authorship over her own career. Elsa Raven as Inga. Elsa Raven was born on September 21, 1929, in Charleston, South Carolina. At 57 years old, she played Inga, the blunt, watchful church regular, in Amen, 1986. Though not a lead, her dry delivery added texture to the church world, making background scenes feel lived in rather than decorative. That restrained presence reflected her private life. Raven never married and lived alone, shaped early by a strict, controlling mother who pushed her into performance before she was emotionally ready, replacing security with pressure. She trained seriously and worked steadily, but Hollywood repeatedly funneled her into marginal roles, often as nameless women on the sidelines. As she aged, physical decline replaced professional pressure. Raven continued working into her late 60s, appearing in Titanic, but by the 2000s, the pace became unsustainable. Retirement in 2011 brought isolation rather than relief, as daily life narrowed to routine, solitude, and careful self-management. Elsa Raven died on November 2, 2020, at 91 years old in Los Angeles, California, from natural causes. She was cremated, and her ashes were returned to her family, marking a quiet farewell consistent with her life. Her estimated $500,000 net worth, built from decades of character work, closed the story of an actress remembered less for fame than for presence. Montrose Hagins as Leola Forbes. Montrose Hagins was born on March 5, 1924, in Charlotte, North Carolina. At 62 years old, she played Leola Forbes, the gentle, steady church matriarch, in Amen, 1986. Her performance brought warmth and moral calm, reinforcing the show's generational balance during its later seasons. That calm was forged over a long, disciplined life. Hagins never married and had no children, spending much of her early adulthood as a school teacher, a role that shaped her patience and authority long before acting entered her life. When she transitioned to television in her 60s, she brought emotional credibility that casting directors valued but also limited. Appearances on Family Matters and The Golden Girls reinforced her image as a nurturing elder, admired for sincerity, yet rarely offered complexity beyond kindness and restraint. Age eventually slowed her pace rather than halted it. After retiring from acting in 2005, Hagins withdrew from public life with intention, choosing privacy over nostalgia. She divided her time among several modest homes and later settled quietly in Pennsylvania, remaining mentally sharp but physically limited. Montrose Hagins died on October 24, 2012, at 88 years old, in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, from natural causes. She was buried at Green Hills Memorial Park, closing a life marked by service rather than spotlight. Her estimated $300,000 net worth reflected modest means, consistent with a career built on dignity, patience, and late-blooming purpose. Rosetta LeNoire as Leola Forbes. Rosetta LeNoire was born on August 8, 1911, in New York City. At 75 years old, she played Leola Forbes, the dignified, morally firm church matriarch, in Amen, 1986. Her performance added emotional weight and generational authority, giving the series a sense of continuity beyond comedy. Her strength on screen was rooted in a life marked by physical hardship and perseverance. As a child, LeNoire suffered from rickets, leaving her with lasting physical limitations that shaped both her confidence and determination. She married William LeNoire, with whom she had one child before their divorce, and later married Egbert Fitzgerald Brown, a relationship that ended with his death in 1973, leaving her to balance grief with an already demanding career that later included family matters. Rather than retreat, she redirected pain into purpose. Facing systemic racial barriers in theater, LeNoire founded AMAS Musical Theater, using her own savings to create opportunities for artists excluded by mainstream casting. Even as diabetes became a constant medical struggle, she continued working, her visibility extending into television and cultural leadership rather than fading with age. Rosetta LeNoire died on March 17, 2002, at 90 years old in Teaneck, New Jersey, from complications of diabetes. She was laid to rest following services at St. Francis of Rome Catholic Church in the Bronx. Her estimated $1 million net worth reflected not wealth accumulation, but a lifetime invested in advocacy, endurance, and lasting artistic impact. Franklin Seals as Lorenzo Hollingsworth. Franklin Seals was born on July 15, 1952, in St. Vincent. At 34 years old, he played Lorenzo Hollingsworth, the stylish, sharp-minded young professional, in Amen, 1986. His presence brought modern tension into the church setting, briefly expanding the show's generational perspective. That promise existed alongside deep personal strain. Seals never married and lived quietly, navigating Hollywood as a gay black actor at a time when openness often meant career loss. While gaining recognition in Silver Spoons and the film The Onion Field, broken relationships and industry prejudice gradually narrowed his professional options, costing him momentum at a critical stage. During filming, health concerns began to surface. Seals developed persistent symptoms, later identified as AIDS-related illness, limiting his ability to work and forcing long absences from the industry. As his condition worsened, opportunities disappeared, leaving talent overshadowed by fear, stigma, and physical decline rather than lack of ability. Franklin Seals died on May 14, 1990, at 37 years old, in Brooklyn, New York, from complications of AIDS. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in the Caribbean Sea, returning him to his birthplace. His estimated $500,000 net worth closed a career defined by brilliance cut short, leaving behind a sense of what might have been rather than what was fully realized. Ron Glass as Jason Lockwood. Ron Glass was born on July 10, 1945, in Evansville, Indiana. At 41 years old, he played Jason Lockwood, a recurring, composed presence in Amen, 1986. Though brief, the role added quiet authority and intellectual balance to the series' ensemble dynamic. That restraint mirrored a personal life kept deliberately private. Glass never married, choosing solitude while navigating Hollywood after the defining success of Barney Miller, which earned him an Emmy nomination but also fixed him in the public mind as the cool, hyper-intellectual detective. He continued to work steadily in television and theater, later reshaping his image through spiritually layered performances, most notably Shepherd Book in Firefly, a role that reflected his real-life conversion to Buddhism and his growing interest in philosophy and inner discipline. Health concerns gradually surfaced and deepened over time. Long years of stage work, travel, and voice acting were followed by chronic respiratory complications, which quietly limited his stamina and availability. Even as his physical condition worsened, Glass still maintained professional commitments and choosing selective projects rather than withdrawal, determined to remain present without courting sympathy. Ron Glass died on November 25, 2016, at 71 years old in Los Angeles from respiratory failure. He was interred at Rose Hills Memorial Park in Whittier, California. His estimated $2 million net worth reflected consistency and longevity, success earned quietly, without spectacle. James Avery as Reverend Tom Crawford. James Avery was born on November 27, 1945, in Pughesville, Virginia. At 41 years old, he appeared as Reverend Tom Crawford, a guest role in Amen, 1986. Though limited in screen time, his commanding voice and presence lent gravitas beyond the episode itself. Behind that authority was a life shaped by discipline and expectation. Avery married Barbara Waters in 1988, a steady intellectual partnership that provided emotional structure as his career expanded. Known for intense preparation and strict standards on set, he often clashed quietly with the industry's demand for speed over depth. While The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made him a cultural icon, the role's popularity sometimes overshadowed his classical training and serious dramatic work. That intensity carried physical consequences. Years of overwork, combined with long-standing heart disease and obesity, placed growing strain on his health. Avery continued working despite medical warnings, believing discipline meant endurance, not retreat. By the time he underwent open-heart surgery, his body had already absorbed decades of pressure, turning recovery into a far greater risk than expected. James Avery died on December 31, 2013, at 68 years old, at Glendale Memorial Medical Center, due to complications from heart surgery. His remains were cremated and scattered near the Pacific Ocean. With an estimated $3 million net worth, his legacy rests not in numbers, but in authority, warmth, and a voice audiences never forgot. Paula Kelly as Teresa. Paula Kelly was born on October 21, 1943, in Jacksonville, Florida. At 43 years old, she played Teresa, a recurring role, in Amen, 1986. Though her appearances were limited, her controlled intensity and physical expressiveness gave the character emotional weight beyond dialogue. Her personal life remained largely private, shaped by difficult choices that followed her rise to prominence. Kelly never had children and experienced long periods of solitude, intensified after the public backlash from posing nude for Playboy in 1969. A decision that strained professional relationships and narrowed casting opportunities. Despite this, she remained respected for her stage work, including a Tony-nominated performance in Sweet Charity and later television success on Night Court, where she earned an Emmy nomination. Behind the scenes, health became a growing concern. Years of demanding dance and performance work placed strain on her body, eventually contributing to chronic heart disease. As her condition progressed, Kelly withdrew from public appearances, choosing privacy over visibility while managing declining strength. Paula Kelly died on February 8, 2020, at 76 years old from chronic heart failure. She left behind an estimated $1 million net worth built across decades of theater, film, and television. Her legacy endures as that of a fearless performer whose talent often came at personal cost. Wittman Mayo as Swifty. Wittman Mayo was born on November 15, 1930, in New York City. At 56 years old, he appeared as Swifty, a guest role in Amen, 1986. Though brief, the role leaned on his familiar warmth, reinforcing the show's sense of lived-in community. Mayo's personal life was marked by instability and strain. He married Melva Washington in 1956, a relationship that eventually ended, followed by another failed marriage before later settling with Gail Mayo, his third wife. Emotional distance and unresolved trauma, particularly PTSD from serving in the Korean War, cast long shadows over his relationships. Professionally, his defining success as Grady Wilson on Sanford and Son brought fame but also typecasting, even as he proved dramatic range in films like Boys in the Hood. Health challenges followed years of stress and physical exhaustion. Mayo struggled with long-standing heart disease, compounded by the psychological toll of war and financial instability between acting jobs. These pressures gradually reduced his workload, pushing him toward teaching and community work rather than screen roles. Wittman Mayo died on May 22, 2001, at 70 years old, after suffering a heart attack at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. His estimated $1 million net worth reflected a career of steady work rather than sustained stardom, closing the chapter on an actor remembered for warmth, resilience, and quiet endurance. LaWanda Page as Darla. LaWanda Page was born on October 19, 1920, in Cleveland, Ohio. At 66 years old, she appeared as Darla, a guest role in Amen, 1986. Though brief, her appearance carried the unmistakable bite and authority audiences already associated with her, instantly grounding the episode in lived experience and sharp humor. Long before Amen, Page's personal life had been shaped by survival rather than stability. She never remarried after being widowed multiple times at a young age, choosing independence over emotional risk. Years on the dangerous Chitlin circuit left psychological scars, where violence, exploitation, and racial disrespect were routine, especially for Black female performers. Even after fame from Sanford and Son and the success of her raw comedy albums like Watch It Sucker, she continued to fight for fair pay and control over her image, refusing to soften her voice for comfort. Physically, that endurance came at a cost. Page lived for decades with diabetes, a condition worsened by exhausting travel schedules, late-night performances, and limited access to consistent health care early in her career. As complications progressed, heart issues followed, gradually reducing her ability to perform, even as her mind remained sharp and her humor undiluted. LaWanda Page died on September 14, 2002, at 81 years old from a heart attack caused by complications of diabetes. She was laid to rest in an outdoor crypt at Inglewood Park Cemetery in California. Her estimated $1 million net worth reflected not extravagance, but a hard-earned legacy built through resilience, defiance, and a voice that refused to be silenced. Jane White as Gregory. Jane White was born on October 30, 1922, in New York City. At 64 years old, she appeared as Gregory, a guest role, in Amen, 1986. Though brief, her presence carried the authority of a seasoned stage actress, lending the episode a quiet gravity rooted in classical training rather than sitcom rhythm. Off-screen, White's life was defined by intellect, discipline, and cultural responsibility. She married Alfredo Viazzi, a New York restaurateur, in 1962, and their relationship blended art with entrepreneurship, including years spent living in Italy. Professionally, White remained devoted to theater, earning Obie Awards for Shakespearean performances and originating the role of Queen Agravain in Once Upon a Mattress, even as television fame remained secondary to artistic integrity. After decades of stage work that demanded emotional and physical stamina, White was diagnosed with cancer, a condition she kept largely private. Even as illness progressed, she continued occasional cabaret performances and archival work, donating her papers to Smith College, determined to preserve legacy rather than retreat into invisibility. Jane White died on July 24, 2011, at 88 years old in New York City from cancer. She left behind an estimated $1 million net worth, reflecting a life sustained by theater, scholarship, and restraint. Her story concludes not with celebrity, but with enduring respect. Time has changed their faces, but not the weight of their stories. From quiet triumphs to private struggles, the Amen, 1986, cast lived lives far more turbulent than the laughter suggested. Which transformation shocked you the most in their journey from then to now? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us as we continue uncovering the hidden lives behind classic television.